Welcome back to DSR. I just got back from the gym, so you're going to get gym version of Bruce today for this video. We got our DDB on drops for July, 4 feats, 3 magic items? 3 magic, something like that. All right, we're going to start off with one called Pack Fighting. And you might have assumed this is like Pack Tactics, and it is not. I mean, it's got some similarities, right? So this is a fighting style feat, which means you can only get it if you have a class or subclass that gives you a fighting style. Now, there's no 5.5e subclasses that give you a fighting style anymore, but there's still the Swords Bard from 5e that gives you a fighting style as the subclass. All right, when you make a melee attack with a weapon or an unarmed strike against a creature, you gain a +1 bonus to the damage roll if at least one of your allies is within 5 feet of the creature and the ally doesn't have the incapacitated condition. So there has to be an ally nearby, kind of like Pack Tactics. But you don't get advantage on the attack roll, you get a +1 to damage. If at least one ally within 5 feet of the creature also has this feat and doesn't have the incapacitated condition, the bonus increases to +2. So if 2 of you have this, the damage goes up. So there's kind of a support aspect as well as a self-buff damage aspect to this. And as far as fighting styles go, I'm going to give this an A, right? Like, you got great weapon fighting. That adds a half a point of DPR, or sorry, half a point of damage per hit per die. So if you have a 2d6 weapon, then it's like a whole 1 point of damage. And this is the same amount of damage. Okay. And it's per hit. Now it adds that same amount of damage regardless of the die size. You know, great weapon fighting only adds that per d6. It's less if they're bigger than d6s. It's more if they're less than d6s. Like there's the double-bladed scimitar that's 2d4. But I don't think that qualifies as great weapon fighting weapon, right? It's two-handed but not heavy. So it varies, right? Great weapon fighting gives you even less if it's a d10 weapon or a d12 weapon. So this is going to be actually more damage. If you want to like do max damage, you can, and because damage is about stacking things. I know this +1 just doesn't feel exciting, but damage is about how much you stack per hit, right? So there's a lot of ways to add +1, +2, or a little bit more on every hit, and this is one way to do it, right? It stacks with everything. So if you want to do max damage with a fighting style and you're a great weapon fighter, a lot of times this is going to be more damage than great weapon fighting, right? Especially if you're, you know, a D12 or D10 weapon, this is more damage. Now, if you get both great weapon fighting and this, that's kind of ideal, right? But note that great weapon fighting also applies to like the magic weapon property dice that the item might have, right? If it's a vicious weapon or a flame tongue weapon, great weapon fighting applies to those dice that are part of the weapon, like the magic enchantment on the weapon. It does not apply to any damage being added to the attack that's separate from the weapon itself. So great weapon fighting doesn't apply to divine smite, doesn't apply to sneak attack and things like that, even if you manage to get sneak attack with a great weapon, which you can with the new rogue class. We got Blade of Radiance from Steinhardt's. So there is a way to do that. Okay, so this is probably better than you think. And if 2 of you get this, that's actually pretty good. And note that it also applies to unarmed strikes. So monks are going to love this because it's increased damage per hit. And who makes the most, has the highest potential for hits? Monks and, you know, fighters with action surge. So yeah, monks are going to love this. At level, what is it, 11, 10, 10? You could be making 5 attacks per round. 5 attacks on your turn. That's 5 or 10 more DPR if you hit with all of those. Yeah, it's a good chunk of damage. And there's not a ton of ways to add damage to monks' unarmed strikes. So this is one of those ways, right? Like, I don't think there's any feat. Like, there's the Tavern Brawler that lets you reroll a 1. And as far as feats go, that's kind of it, unless you're just talking about increasing your chance to hit, which definitely has a big impact on your DPR, but is not adding to the damage roll itself. So you can have Tavern Brawler and this are your options for increasing your unarmed strike damage. However, you cannot get this as a monk, at least not yet, unless we release a subclass that has fighting style. You would have to multi-class with something else to get this, probably fighter, so you can only go 1 level dip and then get your fighting style. I'm not sure that's worth it to give up your capstone, though. Now, if you know you're not going to go to level 20, yeah, maybe dip. So I'm going to give this one, yes, I'm going to give this an A, but it's mostly A for frontliner because it's only A for frontliner because it works. It only really works if there's other allies around. And if you want to maximize the benefit, 2 of you need it and 2 of you need to stay there. So, you know, if you're the only one who has this and you're running in and out, fine. Then you're getting the benefit and nobody else is not getting the benefit because they don't have the feat. But if there's other people who have it, then the best damage for all of you is both of you stay there. Like, not run in and run out, but both of you are there for each other's turns increasing the damage of each other. So it's an A for frontliners, a C for support, but it's a C exclamation point because the support aspect of if somebody else has this, then both of you double your damage. So it's also helping you. C exclamation point for tanking, right? Like, yes, it increases your threat as a tank, but also it's nice that your tanks definitely want to stay in melee and you're buffing your allies with this. D for skirmishers. If you get this as a skirmisher, maybe if you have a tank who has it, then great, you're going to get the +2, but you're going to take away the +2 from them by running out. So I feel like it's not great for skirmishers to do this. Not as good for skirmishers. I don't know. Maybe that D is too low. Maybe I should give it a C or something like that for skirmishers. Let me know in the comments. Okay, the next one is prone fighting, which is weird. This is another fighting style. While you have the prone condition, you don't have disadvantage due to the prone condition on attack rolls, and the prone condition doesn't grant advantage on attack rolls made against you. So the first part is super situational, okay? Because if you're making attacks, it's probably your turn, and you know what? You should just stand up and not have the disadvantage anyway on the attack rolls. Like, you just want to be standing up anyway. Yes, there's situations where you can't stand up if you're grappled or something like that, or restrained, you have no movement, or maybe you just want to stay down, I guess, to avoid things. But you can also just stand up, make your attacks, and drop prone. Dropping prone on your turn costs you nothing. No movement, no action, just drop prone. And that way you can like attack on your turn normally, drop prone, and then, because you're trying to cause them to have disadvantage on range attacks against you. The second part is actually pretty good, right? Because if they knock you down, they're going to keep attacking you with advantage. They and all of their allies, all the other enemies, are going to attack you with advantage until it's your turn and you can stand back up. So this is going to prevent all of those advantage attack rolls against you. So I'm going to give it an A for survival and a D on the offensive side, which is the first half, because you should just stand up, right? If that's your plan, if you're like trying, like if you're planning to be prone a lot while you're attacking, I don't know. That's like, it's just easier to take a different fighting style that's going to give you a bigger benefit, and don't worry about that. And as far as the second half, yes, that's nice to prevent you from, having advantage on attacks rolls against you while knocked prone. But you know what's better? Doing something else that just prevents you from being knocked prone, right? And buff your strength saving throw, right? A lot of things that knock you prone or that even things that will restrain you are strength saving throws. The lesser portion of those are going to be dexterity saving throws, but the majority are going to be strength saving throws. I don't know. This seems like an expensive way to prevent advantage on attacks against you from being prone. But nevertheless, I'm going to give it an A for survival. Then we have two general feats, Shifting Combatant. It's a general feat, so it requires level 4, and it also requires a weapon mastery feature. And specifically, you have to use push to get half of the feature from this. You can increase your strength or dexterity by 1 to a maximum of 20. Then you have Domino Strike. When you hit a creature with a weapon and activate the push mastery property to push the creature into a space occupied by a large or smaller creature, you can force the creatures to collide. Each creature must succeed on a Constitution saving throw, DC 8, plus the ability score increased by this feat and your proficiency bonus, or have the prone condition. So yeah, first of all, you must be using the push mastery, which is not one of the most popular masteries. I mean, it's good. I wouldn't only use a push weapon. What's usually better is to have two weapons, use push to push them into place, and then so that they're adjacent to another enemy, and then run up with a cleave, follow it up with a cleave. I think that's a better strategy most of the time. I don't know. It really depends on what you're doing. But yeah, push is okay. So if you're not going to go push, probably don't take this, because that is the best part of this feat too. All right, and this, and I'm going to bring this up, the snippet, and put it on the screen here. I'm going to look over here on my other screen where I've got this while I'm recording. But the rules of creatures and combat there's no rule that I found that says that creatures can't be pushed into other creatures' spaces. So the default already is that you can push creatures into other creatures' spaces. I used to assume that you could not just push a creature into another space. I've never found anything that says that. They can't willingly move into each other's spaces, right? And they can't willingly end a move in each other's spaces, but there's nothing saying you can't push them into each other's spaces. So you can already push them into each other's spaces. And the base rule of moving around other creatures is, it's the very last sentence of this snippet on the screen. If you somehow end a turn in a space with another creature, you have the prone condition, no save, unless you are tiny or of a larger size than the other creature. Okay, so there's already going to be a prone state for one of them, possibly no save at the end of the turn, right? And here's how it works: if one of them's tiny, then neither of them are affected. If they're both the same size, then both of them are automatically knocked prone. Automatically. No save, nothing they can do about it. The only way one of them isn't knocked prone is if one's larger. And then the larger one is the one that's not knocked prone. And the smaller of the two, as long as it's not tiny, the smaller of the two is auto prone at the end of the turn. And that's just the movement rules in combat. Okay, so this isn't nearly as good as you think. It's not like, oh, I get push plus topple. Like you can already push people into other creature spaces without this, and they were already be prone automatically, no save, right? So in some ways, it's pushes just straight up better than topple. All right, where is this actually going to be useful? All right, there's a couple of scenarios, which is one, on your first attack, if you cause this to happen and knock them prone, you now have advantage because they're prone. And if you move within 5 feet in attack, you now have advantage in your attack roll for your second attack or however many attacks you have left. All right, so because the normal movement rule is they don't fall prone until the end of this turn. Okay, so that's one way that this is better. The other way that this is better is if they're not the same size, but you want the one that's bigger to be the one that's prone, right? So you can push them into each other, and at least then you'll have an attempt to cause a saving throw, and it's the Constitution saving throw, just like topple, right? So unlike what is it, open hand monk, which can force a saving throw to knock them prone, that's a strength save if I recall correctly, or it's a dex. It's one or the other. This is Constitution, just like topple, which is unfortunate. It would have been nice if this was a different saving throw than topple, just for the saving throw variety. So maybe you get push and topple, and you're going to hit them and then try to topple them as well. And you also have a way to cause, like this one should have been a dex, right? So that they don't accidentally bump into each other. That feels like it would have made more sense, and it would have made this mechanically more interesting so that you have two different saving throws to attempt to target to cause them to fall prone. One's Constitution, which is topple, and one is dex, which would be this one. Unfortunately, that's not what we've got. They're both Constitution, which makes this more redundant with topple. I don't know. Seems like a strange choice. So yeah, this one's better if you want them prone during your turn for the rest of your attacks, and is better if you want the larger, they're not the same size, and you want the larger creature to also have to make a save or be knocked prone, because that's the one you want to target more for some reason. All right, then the second part of this feat is Fearless Leap. When you make a long jump, moving at least 10 feet immediately before the jump and land in a space within 5 feet of 2 or more enemies, attack rolls made against you have disadvantage till the start of your next turn. This one is super weird, worded in a clunky way. And the way it's worded is also super niche. I can't think of a single time a player has done this, where they took a running long jump and landed next to enemies. I can't think of a single time. It may have happened, but I cannot recall one single time. Now, they have in combat maybe a dozen times out of 11 or 12,000 hours now, I'm not sure, playing DMing 5th edition and 5.5, I've seen them take a long jump in combat maybe a dozen times. Like that's just really, really rare to begin with, because you have to run 10 feet before you make the long jump. Otherwise, the distance is... Actually, I don't know if you can. Can you make a long jump without... Can you make a standing long jump? I think you have to run the 10 feet first. And that's one of the problems, right? Okay, so let's say you make a running long jump. You're going to deal with the complex mechanics of running 10 feet first and then making a jump. And then you have to land within 5 feet of 2 or more enemies. So that makes it even more rare. The 2 enemies have got to be adjacent so that you can land adjacent to both of them at the same time. Otherwise, if you land again just adjacent to one enemy, this does nothing, which is bizarre. On top of that, it says attack rolls made against you have disadvantage till the start of your next turn. So now every attack roll from any enemy has disadvantage against you until the start of your next turn, right? It's not limited to the people you landed next to. It's just anybody has disadvantage on attack rolls against you. So this makes no sense, but yeah, that actually makes it mechanically more powerful. So you might want to be looking for those opportunities where there are 2 enemies adjacent at any time, just so that you can on purpose back up, run, make a long jump to land next to them, just to cause them to have disadvantage, cause everybody to have disadvantage on attack rolls against you till the start of your next turn. This one's weird. And I really question whether or not that is what they meant to do. So I'm gonna give it like a C on the control effect and a C on the survival aspect for both of these 2 features of the feat, but it's a C exclamation point. You can optimize around it. You can optimize around the scenarios. Like, I mean, I guess you could still use this with the jump spell too, right? Like, all it says is you have to run 10 feet first. You would still have to run 10 feet first before you do the jump spell jump, or the jump you get from boots of striding and leaping and striding. It should still work with either of those. You just have to still move 10 feet first, just so that you can be activating this. And you know what? You can optimize that further by choosing a species that allows you to grow large, or getting other features like subclass features that allow you to grow large. Because the bigger you are, the higher your chance of being able to land with two creatures next to you, right? If they are not adjacent and 5 feet apart, you can land between them if you're medium. But if they're 10 feet apart and you're large sized, you can land between them and still activate this because would be within 5 feet of both of them. The bigger you are, the more enemies you can land next to. So there are ways to optimize around it. Still, this is going to be kind of a niche build. I would have a hard time thinking that, or I think it would be, you would have a hard time trying to make this like something that you can use in every single combat, or even half the rounds of every single combat, like, which is what you'd need for me to give this like an A. Yeah, you'd have to be able to use it in half the rounds of every combat for this to get an A. So you might be able to get it up to a B by using it one round of every combat. Not great though. Not great. This is weird. I'm going to give it a C overall. Then we have Tactical Combatant. Fortunately, this one's a little better. So it is a general feat as well. You got to be level 4, and it requires you to have a strength or dexterity score of 13. You increase your strength or dexterity score by 1 to a maximum of 20, and you get Buffering Strike. When you hit a creature with a weapon, you can gain temporary hit points equal to the total number rolled on the weapon's damage dice. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you roll initiative or finish a short or long rest. Okay, so for some builds, this is actually pretty good, right? So the ones that this is good for are the people who have the potential for big hits, right? Which usually means fewer attacks, bigger hits, which also means those builds that have like high number of attacks that are small are going to get less out of this, because this is like at most once per combat, right? So monks, this is not so good. Monks have the most hit attacks that deal generally the lowest amount of damage. But rogues, right? If you use this on a sneak attack, that could be a huge amount of temporary hit points, right? You're level 19 or 20, so you're rolling 10d6 for your sneak attack. Maybe you're an assassin to double that damage. Use this on that assassinate attack on the first round, and you, I don't know, giving yourself 20d6. What is that? 70 temporary hit points plus whatever the base damage of your attack roll. Let's call it 80 temporary hit points at the start of every combat, as long as you activate assassinate. Now, plus your it's not called assassinate. Assassinate is your third level feature. It's your death strike. So between assassinate and death strike, you could be getting easily like 90 temporary hit points at the start of every single combat as a rogue. So rogues, this is your shtick. The next most ones are going to be like, you know, berserker barbarians, zealot barbarians, where they can add a bunch of damage to one hit. Even like druids and clerics, who have the ability to add that damage once per hit on one attack roll, once on each of their turns. They can add the extra damage. That's going to make it a nice chunk of temporary hit points that they can use once every single combat. So there are ways to make this pretty good. I'm going to give it a B exclamation point, because it's not good on every single build, but like half the builds out there can benefit from this pretty nicely, right? Nobody should be just ignoring the ability to get 10 or more temporary hit points at the start of every single combat. Pretty good. Then Honed Instincts. When you fail an ability check, you can roll 1d6 and add the number rolled to the ability check, potentially turning it into a success. Once you use the benefit, you can't use it again until you roll initiative or finish a short or long rest. And it says fail an ability check, not when you roll an ability check, which means you cannot use this on the initiative roll, because there is no failure state for the initiative roll, even though that is a dexterity ability check. So you can't use this on dexterity, and it is weird that it resets with initiative, because you're not making very many ability checks in combat. So why reset this with rolling initiative for combat? I don't know. You could have just gone totally esoteric and just said it resets at the start of any encounter, and then the DM would just decide this is a social encounter, it reset, or this is an exploration encounter, it reset. There's never been a precedence for that, but that's kind of what we're going for here. Is okay, at the beginning of every combat encounter it resets, but there's only because the initiative roll itself is a specific event that always occurs at the beginning of initiative, and there is no specific event that always occurs at the beginning of social and exploration encounters, except that everybody knows it's now a social encounter, or it's now a exploration encounter. I mean, you could have just said that, right? At the start of any encounter, whether it's combat, exploration, or social, you get this. And the DM could adjudicate that. I think you could make it work just fine. This part is kind of weak. I'm going to give it a C. I mean, the more combats you're in, the more often it resets, and then you're going to use it for more social and combat or more social exploration encounters. However, I still call for a lot of ability checks in combat, but I've never seen another DM do that. Usually, I think I've only ever seen other DMs using, and I don't play as a player a lot, right? So don't take this as my view of the other DMs is highly experienced, right? I like 1% of my D&D time is being a player. Therefore, I have a limited view of what other DMs are doing. But also what others talk about online. It seems like people, like DMs, rarely call for ability checks in combat, mainly just for escaping a grapple or escaping web or spells that call for an ability check specifically, right? When you stabilize a creature and you don't use the healer's kit, you can make a medicine check DC 10 to stabilize them. Right? I think people forget about that one because there's spare the dying and healer's kits. With a healer's kit, you just expend one use and you auto stabilize them, or spare the dying, you auto stabilize them. Like I think people just forget about medicine because those two are so easy to access. Anyway, I do call for a lot of ability checks in combat. And if you don't as a DM, or if your DM doesn't call for them and you'd like them to call for more, one of the easy ways to add a bunch of ability checks to combat is that when the PCs first spot the enemies, usually often right when you're rolling initiative, have all the PCs get a free knowledge check to try to figure out what those creatures are. Right? And you can apply degrees of success. I have a whole video on this. I'll put a card in that links to it. And that's a great way to both make knowledge skills way more valuable and increase the number of ability checks that you're rolling in combat. Another one I like to do in combat is call for performance check. Whenever a player says something silly that's like role play, they intended as role play only, I'll ask them, do you want to make a performance check for that? And most of the time they're like, yeah. So I roll a performance. So they roll a performance check, and if it rolls well, we narrate something. They did something cool, like the thing they're trying to insult the goblin. If they roll high, they insult the goblin really well, and then I narrate the goblin as like crying, right? You hurt his feelings, and people, usually love that and it's fun. If they roll low, then you look silly and failed to, insult them. And usually it has no mechanical impact, and it's just actually fun moments in combat. It makes combat way more fun. Like you'd be surprised. Just try it. It makes combat way more fun. If they roll extremely low, like a 1, I might narrate them something, making them look really bad. I usually, very rarely, apply any negative mechanical impact from rolling a 1 for that kind of a scenario. It was a free roll. They're just for role play. I'm not going to penalize them for rolling extremely low on that. It's just going to be narrative penalty, right? You just looked foolish. If you roll really high, you may gain a mechanical benefit for doing that in combat, especially if you add some more role play to it. And or I'll award experience for that roll. Like you just meant to insult them, you rolled a nat 20 on the performance check for your insult. The player is like, great, leans into it, comes up with a really nasty insult, your mama joke or something like that. I'll give them experience for it. Kind of relative to the current level. So if you're low level, you might get 10, maybe 25 experience. If you're higher level, I might give you 100 experience for doing that. Just to encourage players like, oh yeah, you get rewarded if you attempt to role play in combat and lean into the fun of attempting these performance checks. Anyway, those are ways to use ability checks more often in combat, which would align with the reset criteria for this, which is when you roll initiative, I guess. Anyway, if you don't run into a lot of combats, ironically, this ends up not being able to be used very often, maybe once or twice per day, depending on how many short rest you get. And you won't be able to use it very often for the things that you're most likely to want to use it for, which is social encounters and exploration encounters. So for that part of it, I'm going to give it a C for the ability check portion. But it's a B for the first half, that buffering strike for like half the marshals out there. This is pretty good. So a B for that. And then we have 3 magic items, right? Climber's Ammunition is the first one. This is weapon/ammunition. When you hit a solid surface with a piece of this magic ammunition, the ammunition attaches to the surface and a magic rope trails out from behind it. The rope remains in place for 1 hour or until you dismiss it. No action required. It can support up to 500 pounds at once, breaking if that limit is exceeded. Once the rope vanishes, the ammunition becomes non-magical. If you hit a creature with this ammunition, the ammunition immediately breaks on impact and deals no damage to the target. Okay, so you can't like harpoon people with this. And in situations where you need a rope in a plate dangling from a place, this is going to be good. However, it doesn't specify the length of the rope. The best I can come up with is that the rope trails from you to wherever it hits. So if you use a longbow, then the rope is 600 feet. And if that's how this is meant to be interpreted and how this is meant to work, that's pretty good, right? Getting like you don't need to make an attack roll to hit S square. I mean, there's no rules for it. The DM may adjudicate and say you got to make an attack roll, and it varies on the location, but by a little bit. I might do that depending on the distance, right? If you're shooting from like at something a square 5 feet away or within 30 feet, I probably wouldn't have you make an attack roll at all. You automatically hit that, but the further away it gets, the higher the DC of the attack roll or the AC you have to hit the exact space you want. But I wouldn't have you like miss and it does nothing. You would just hit, depending on how far you miss that AC or the DC of this check, it would just vary, by 1 or 2 squares away off of what you wanted to hit. So yeah, if that's the way it worked, this is pretty good. Like you can cross chasms that are 600 feet wide with a longbow with this. Nice. So I'm going to give it, but I'm going to give it a C, right? It's pretty situational. Like that's not going to come up very often. Let me double check that. Okay, so I'm going to give this a C, but it's a C exclamation point for both survival and mobility. There are situations that will come up where this will be useful. It is a little bit interesting. This is uncommon and not like common. Then we have Goggles of Foe Finding. These are rare, require attunement. While you're wearing these goggles, your ranged attacks with weapons ignore half cover and 3/4 cover. Simple, and this is pretty good. The decision of whether or not to wear them really comes down to, do you have enough better magic items that require attunement versus how many feat slots do you have available, right? Because you can take Sharpshooter to do the same thing, or Spell Sniper. Wait, it says range attacks with weapons. So yeah, Sharpshooter will do the same thing, not Spell Sniper. And then you have to weigh, like, do I for my build, do I have enough feats where I can fit Sharpshooter? If so, you probably should take Sharpshooter and not worry about these, because this is going to take an attunement slot. You only get 3 of those, but you get 4 general feat slots. So it's 3 versus 4. And depending on how the itemization is working in your games, like if your DM is stingy or you can't craft, but if you can craft, you're definitely going to be able to get the things you want. Comes down to those factors. But I'll say this is good, right? It's an A, right? Removing the penalty or the AC bonus to the target of half cover is 2, and the AC bonus for 3/4 cover is 5. And these come up all the time, or they should come up all the time. Like they come up a lot because creatures cause half cover. And corners, like going around a corner, causes 3/4 cover. These should come up a lot of time, but as I hear from all my players, I'm the only DM who plays with cover. I don't know why. I don't know why more DMs don't play with cover. If you're not playing with cover, you're removing like half of the tactical aspect of combat. And that might be a reason why you think combat is boring. Like I hear constantly how people think combat in 5th edition is boring. One of the reasons is probably because you're not using cover, right? That removes all the tactics of combat, or most of the tactical positioning of combat. The other thing is you're not role-playing during combat, right? You and the players should all be role-playing during combat. Role-playing insults, role-playing decision-making for the monsters, role-playing everything. And if you just do those 2 things, your combat will probably go from boring to pretty fun right there, and you didn't have to implement any crazy new mechanic systems. All right, so this is going to be an A. Then our last magic item and last piece of player option content for this D&D Beyond drops is the Stormwalker's Cloak. Also rare, requires attunement. And while wearing this cloak, you gain the following benefits. Shocking feedback. The cloak has 3 charges and regains all expended charges daily at dawn. You can cast Hellish Rebuke from the cloak, DC 13, and the spell does your choice of lightning or thunder damage instead of the usual fire damage. I'm a big fan of reusing spells instead of writing all the rules text into a thing. So I love their usage of this, and you just like swap out the damage type, and suddenly it feels like a very completely different thing, right? Hellish Rebuke, but it's lightning or thunder. Great. I love the usage of that. However, that DC, I think that the DC for rare magic items is usually like a 15. I looked up the spell scrolls, and the spell scrolls for rare spell scrolls is DC 15, starts at DC 15. I don't know why it's a DC 13. That's pretty low for a rare magic item. So that makes this pretty weak, and casting Hellish Rebuke at first level is only 2d10. Depending on how generous your DM is with magic items, you might not get this till end of tier 2 or beginning of tier 3. And at that point, using your reaction to do like maybe 11 damage, which on a saving throw, they're probably going to save against, and then they're going to take half. So you're looking at 5 damage, is not a good use of your reaction. You probably have better uses of your reaction by this point. Yeah, this part of it is pretty weak. But the second part, storm resistance, you have resistance to lightning and thunder damage. 2 damage types, that's pretty good on 1 magic item. And I would say it's really good, except that in 5.5, they removed attunement from the rings of resistance. So now if you allow your players to craft rings of resistance, and there's no rule saying they can't have 10 of those, one on every single finger, they can just be resistant to every single damage type in the game. So be careful, DMs, but with allowing players to craft rings of resistance or find rings of resistance or buy rings of resistance. What I do to mitigate that is simply say you can only have 1 magic ring per hand. And that's on top of attunement, right? So yes, I didn't add attunement back to them, but you can still only have 1 magic ring per hand. You can only have 1 magic amulet per neck. You can only wear 1 cloak at a time. You can only wear 1 goggles at a time. You can only wear 1 hat or helmet at a time, right? That controls these things. Anyway, so as long as you have something to control that, whether it's you just don't allow downtime and you don't have magic item shops, and so you literally, your players cannot get anything that you don't award them, then this is a lot better. So assuming you're in one of those places where you control the number of rings of resistance your players can get, then this is pretty good. I'm going to give it an A for the survival aspect of having 2 damage type resistances, and lightning is fairly common. Thunder is not rare, but it's less common. So it's pretty good, both of those for 1 magic item. This is going to be an A, but a C for the range damage. And relative to a rare magic item, it might be a D. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Check the video description. You can find links to join my Discord community. If you love D&D, you might be a good fit. But if you love arguing and being a toxic debater in Reddit, then you're probably not a good fit for this community. So just don't join if that's how you like to debate things, is by attacking people. There's a link to join my Patreon. If you want to support in that way, that's wonderful. Not necessary, but very, very much appreciated. There's also a link to the Google Drive that has all these ratings in it. And that is also, there's no paywall for that or the Discord. So you can access both of those for free, and those will always be free. My goal is to create community resources that help make D&D more accessible to more people. And paywalling that would be counterproductive, would undermine the whole point. So those will never be paywalled. And remember that D&D is a game. The point of it is to have fun with your friends, all right? So please be cool when you play D&D, all right? Catch you next time.